Morning Bumblebees, hope everybody's doing really well today. So we're going to start our English work today and we're just going to recap our work from yesterday where you were planning your new adventure story. So we started off yesterday by looking at this story mountain and we talked about either having a 5-part story or a 3-part story. So we're going to focus on that today because you spent some time yesterday creating your plan. So here is a copy of your plan. So we had some notes about the story here, and then your job yesterday was to come up with some ideas for your new version of Mud Puddle Farm, where we're going to introduce Peter Rabbit to the farm, who causes lots of trouble, gets into lots of mischief, and Farmer Rafferty ends up telling Peter off, catches him, then gives him a job to do because he doesn't want him getting into mischief anymore on the farm. So that was yesterday's lesson. So in today's lesson we're going to create a new adventure story. So we're going to write about a new adventure story, and today we're going to focus on the opening of that adventure story. So here on the screen you can see my version of the story. So we're all going to become awesome authors today and we're going to create our own adventure stories. So we're going to write it in chapters. So if you're in red team or orange team, you're going to have 5 chapters in your story. And if you are in the rest of the teams in our class, you're going to have 3 chapters in your story. We're going to condense it down just a little bit. So here you can see chapter 1, and then we will have a look at chapter 2 in today's lesson as well. And then your job will be to go away for the rest of the lesson and to write your chapter 1 and your chapter 2. So first of all, we're going to listen and enjoy, and then we will talk about the features afterwards. So, chapter 1. Once there was a family of all sorts of animals that lived down at Mud Puddle Farm. Every morning, Frederick, the flame-feathered cockerel, wakes the animals by shouting, "Wakey, wakey!" Frederick called and called until all the animals were awake, all except one, Mossop. He was the laziest, sleepiest cat you have ever seen on a farm. One animal who hated Frederick was Peter. Peter was a rabbit who had only just moved onto the farm, and he's the cheekiest, most mischievous bunny that you have ever met. So Peter Rabbit is going to be our new character that we're going to introduce to Mud Puddle Farm. Now, just before we continue with the rest of our story, we're just going to have a look at some of these writing features that we have got in our writing here. So you can see all the way through my story, I have highlighted, circled, coloured in, used lots and lots of different ways of writing so that you can see different writing features. So the first thing we're going to look at are capital letters. Now, all the way through the story, you will see that I have circled lots of capital letters. So we've got once and every, we've got Frederick, we've got one, and we've got Peter as the start of our sentences. Then we've also got the M from Mud Puddle, the F from Farm, the F from Frederick, the P from Peter here, and the F from Frederick there. Now they have all been made into capital letters, and that's because they are the names of characters. So just think about, you need a capital letter for the beginning of your sentences and if you are using the name of somebody. Now we've used a range of sentence openers in here as well. So we've got a sentence opener there which says once. Now the word once I have actually magpied straight from the story of Mud Puddle Farm, because it says once there was a family of all sorts of animals. That is the exact start that Michael Morpurgo used in his story. So we're going to magpie that and use that in my story. Now last week and the week before you did some work looking at suffixes. Now if you remember from your learning, a suffix is something that we add to the end of a word. So we've got the root word and then a suffix will go on the end of that word to change the meaning of it. So we have got, for example, here we've got the word shouting. Here we've got the word cold. Here we've got the word laziest and sleepiest. So we've used the est suffix there. We've got cold over here. We've got feathered over here. So we've used a whole range of different suffixes. We've got cheekiest and moved. So we've got a whole range of different suffixes here in our writing. Now, if we move on to punctuation, we've also got a whole range of different punctuation, because if I look here very carefully, at the end of wakey wakey, I have used an exclamation mark, which is part of my different punctuation. Okay, and then I've also used an exclamation mark at the end of Mossop. I've used full stops all the way through where I need them at the end of my sentences. Now, we've already actually talked about use of the story. I can tick that one off because this opening sentence here is lifted directly from the story. I have magpied those ideas from the story. I've also used the name of the farm, the name of the animals, so Frederick the cockerel, Farmer Rafferty, Mossop the cat. So I've used the story quite a lot in my version. And then finally, the last bit of writing features we're going to look at today, we have got contracted form. So here we've got the word you've, which is you have, but we've contracted it and used an apostrophe, and he's, which would be he is, but again we've used contracted form. So have a see if you can use contracted form. We have covered it quite a bit in class, to see if you can pop one of those in as well, and just remember to use those apostrophes. So let's have another read of chapter 1 before we move on to chapter 2. So chapter 1. There was a family of all sorts of animals that lived down at Mudpuddle Farm. Every morning, Frederick, the flame-feathered cockerel, wakes the animals by shouting, "Wakey, wakey!" Frederick called and called until all the animals were awake, all except one, Mossop. He was the laziest, sleepiest cat you have ever seen on a farm. One animal who hated Frederick was Peter. Peter was a rabbit who had only just moved to the farm. And he's the cheekiest, most mischievous bunny you have ever met. Chapter 2. A Runaway Tractor. Later that day, whilst Mossop was snoring loudly, Peter snuck off and went to explore the farm. Before long, he was up to no good. He found the greenhouse where all the delicious crops were growing and started to munch and crunch on the carrots. Then Peter spotted the bright blue tractor where Mossop slept all day in the sunshine and gently turned the key. Suddenly, the tractor started to move and Mossop woke up with a fright. And that's the end of chapter 2. So the first thing, how exciting is the ending of that chapter? We've finished it with an exclamation mark, but we've also finished it with something that we call a cliffhanger. Now, a cliffhanger means that as a reader or as somebody who's reading this story, I really want to know what happens next. So that is a sign of a really good author, that they can make you want to read on and find out a little bit more. So let's go through again. We are fully aware of our capital letters. So we've got later that day. We have got before long with the capital. We've got H for he. We have got T for then. We've got S for suddenly. They are all capital letters because they all start our sentences. And then we have also got M for Mossop and P for Peter because they are the names of characters. And then again, we've got another one here, a P for Peter and an M for Mossop are all capital letters. So just double check you're getting your capital letters right. Now, in this piece of work, we've got more sentence openers than we did in the last chapter. So we've got the start, and if we look here, all of the ones that have been underlined in green are our sentence openers. So we've got later that day, before long, then, and suddenly. So all of our sentence openers here have been underlined in green for you to see really carefully. So it just structures our chapter to say later on that day, then before long, then we've used the word then, which tells us what happens next, and finally we've used the word suddenly, which captures our reader and makes the writing interesting. We've got a range of suffixes. They have been underlined in orange. So just cast your eye down the picture now and see if you can spot any suffixes that have been underlined with a straight line in orange. So we've got whilst, snoring loudly. So we've snoring and loudly. We've got growing. We've got started. We have got spotted, gently, and turned and started. So we have a range of suffixes there. So challenge yourself to see if you can use a range of suffixes in your writing as well. Now, punctuation, again, we've used very similar punctuation to chapter 1. We've got an exclamation mark that ends our chapter, and we've got full stops all the way through to show where a sentence ends. We've used the story, not so much as we did in the first one, because in the first story, in the first chapter, we really magpied the ideas. In this chapter, we've just used some ideas like the farm, the greenhouse, the crops, and Mossop, and the big blue tractor, because Mossop sleeps on there. Okay, and then contracted form is there just to remind you that we can use contracted form when we are writing our stories. So just one more thing to bring here, we have got some very key vocabulary. So we've got greenhouse, crops, bright blue tractor, which gives it a little bit of description, snook, and fright. So they're all words where I've changed them, because I could have put later that day while Mossop was asleep, Peter went off and went to explore the farm. Whereas instead of saying that, he just went to sleep, we said he was snoring loudly, and we said that Peter snuck off. We can really get a picture of what Peter is doing rather than he just went. So have a think about the language that you are using. So it's going to be your challenge for the rest of today's lesson to write chapter 1 or chapter 1 and chapter 2, which is just the opening of your story. You are going to stop where Peter has done something naughty on the farm, and then in my story, Mossop has woken up, and then we've not got chapter 3. That will come tomorrow. So just pace your writing. You don't need to write the whole story today. Just pace your writing, because you will be able to do them tomorrow. So just a couple of reminders. When you're writing stories, don't forget you need a really, really exciting opening so your readers will want to read more. You know how excited I get when I'm reading your writing, so just make sure it's really exciting for me to read, especially at the moment, because I can't wait to read a really good story. Use a range of sentence starters, which we've talked about, to keep your writing interesting to read. Use precise nouns, so names of people, places, and objects. Precise verbs, so doing words, just like I've said, he snuck off or he was snoring loudly. And adjectives, describing words, the bright blue tractor. So use those adjectives in there to describe. And then finally, challenge yourself for that cliffhanger. Finish this part of the story with a cliffhanger, which will make your reader want to read more. So if you read my last sentence, I've got suddenly the tractor started to move and Mossop woke up with a fright. That makes me want to find out what happens in chapter 3. So good luck, have some fun with this, write some really brilliant stories. I can't wait to read them. Can you send them me on a picture? And I will have a read of your stories and see how exciting your adventures have got on Rough Farm.